Thank you, thank you. So, yes, I am Hamish Makgill, and the talk is 5 things I've learnt so far. As Lawrence pointed out, stressing on the so far. I'll talk about that a bit more at the end, that really everything I've learnt replaced something I learnt before, and I'm sure these will all be replaced again in a few years' time. Everything's always changing, always learning. So the first one is have a point of view. I remember going to a talk by a fantastic illustrator, George Hardy, someone that Lawrence knows well, someone we both taught with in Brighton. And he had a little story. I'm stealing someone else's anecdote here, which is quite convenient. But he was approached once by a woman who said to him, "George, what is it? What do you do?" And he said, I'm an illustrator. And she said, no, yeah, okay, I understand you're an illustrator, but what do you do? What is it that you do? And the penny dropped. And it's a really interesting question. Actually, I could say I'm a graphic designer, but what is it that I do? What is it that all of you do? What is your voice within that discipline? And so for my studio, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, we knew this. This was something that was in our heads, in the way we worked, but we declared it on our site. Our proposition was that we make beautifully simple work. So it was really interesting declaring that and actually voicing it to the outside world. Everyone seemed to really appreciate it. And now whenever I get a job application or a CV, it always starts with, "I love simple work." So it seems like everyone's understood us now, maybe a bit too easily, but it is what we do. And I think if there is something that our strength lies in, it's about taking an idea and distilling it down to a really simple, core, clear piece of communication. So alongside these points, I'm just going to show you some of our work, which I think helps exemplify it. This isn't our work. This is a Jeep designed for the American military called a Bantam Jeep. And I think when you talk about simplicity, you always tend to think maybe of minimalism, a sort of John Pawson church, something really austere and simple in that respect. But simplicity doesn't necessarily come from that. Simplicity is a process where you're asking yourself, what is redundant in this design? What can I remove before the design no longer functions? Before it loses its meaning or its ability to communicate. And I just think this is always a really fantastic example of it. So this Jeep was designed so that it could be mended by hand in the sand dunes of a desert. So there was nothing on that Jeep that didn't need to be there. And I think design can still be beautiful, bold, colourful, everything. It doesn't have to be dull for being simple. But you can get rid of the noise, the stuff that's not needed there. So the first project, this is something we've just done, released at the end of last year, the 2014 It's Nice That annual. So on the front of each annual, it felt wrong that a blog that's so active and constantly evolving and changing should have a book, a tomb. It felt like it was setting something in concrete that doesn't feel right. So we worked out a way that within the fairly tight budget, we could produce 50 different covers. So there's 50 different postcards available for the book. And the printers had to put them in randomly. And so when a box of books turns up to a bookshop, you'll have largely different covers. So it feels like a really good way of putting the idea of them forward. But we wanted to do something a bit more than just the cover for it, just this idea for the cover. The last 2 annuals for It's Nice That have been nice, beautiful books, but they're sort of cloth-bound covers. It didn't feel like there was anything that you could distinguish between them or maybe from other art books at the time. So we like the idea of creating something that people could refer to. So in a few years' time when people say, "Oh, do you remember that It's Nice That annual? Do you remember the blue one?" So we like this idea of making it iconic, and we use colour to do that. So this thing is this blue object, which goes right into the book. So really straightforward idea, but it wasn't easy to actually get this past the client. They were really worried about how the blue was going to look with imagery. But it was also really hard to do with the budget, to make sure that we could get blue the whole way through it, along the edges, but also make sure that that blue was exactly the same the whole way through the book. And then there is another idea in there, and the one thing that we thought that It's Nice That would really stand for. And interestingly, I was in a small group where they were asking us about the future of It's Nice That. I think you were there, Lawrence, some years ago. And I've always criticised them for being too nice, strangely. And I felt like they could be a little bit more sharp and maybe a little bit more critical. And by the time this came along, this brief, I actually realised that that'd be totally wrong. And actually, the way they stand for being so positive and everything being the world of nice is a great thing. So we wanted to really celebrate that in the book. So all the language is really emphasised with that, ooh, it's nice, super nice exhibitions. It goes on throughout the book. And received really well on Instagram, but there's a little thought in this that when you're producing something nowadays, and I had a meeting with a big client yesterday actually, and they were talking about a very expensive project they'd done, and it was deemed a failure, even though it looked beautiful in the flesh, is because it didn't photograph well on Instagram. And it suddenly became really important. You need to think about this. You need to decide whether it's important or not, but everything is captured on our tiny devices, and it's particularly when something works, you can see it. That's got a strong identity at this size, but other projects wouldn't have that. So it's something just to bear in mind, not to pander to, but just to think about. Anyway, I'm going off track. Another piece of branding we've done, so something that's not really been said, the kind of work we do at the studio is largely branding, but we work for established clients who've got branding. We design whiskey bottles, we design books, as you've seen, lots of websites, but something we really love doing is identity work for clients who start with nothing. So this is a furniture company called H. Very, very simple strip-back identity. To kind of allow the products and everything to come forward. Okay, I think the next thing that I have learnt so far is find the story. When you, as a designer, I find that if you get the idea absolutely straight in your head, so you could describe it to someone without drawing anything, then designing the rest of it is easy. If you're muddled and you can't quite articulate it, that will come through in the design, and it'll be virtually impossible to make it work as well as it could. Now, we work with lots of people who talk about this word strategy, and my industry, especially in the branding side of it, is everyone's talking about strategy, and they profile their audience and they work out exactly what they eat and where they go, and this noise, it's horrible. Some of it's all right, but actually the most important thing as designers, and the reason why you lot are here, is to learn intuition. You know, it's to have a sense of what's right, to hear something that might need resolving, and to be able to, through instinct and your gut and your heart, work out what the right solution is, or to be able to see it when you do it, or know that it's not right when you've done the wrong. So this is a project that we did a few years ago. This is in Shoreditch Box Park. And the reason why I pick on this, I love showing this because I love the idea of doing something at this scale, but we went around the houses with ideas on this, and we thought, well, the last thing we want to do is make shipping containers look like shipping containers. It seems so boring and obvious. And actually, it took us a while, and then we realised that is the perfect thing to do. The fact these things are shipping containers and they're beautiful for what they are, they're the perfect piece of signage. And so we turn these things that have been painted white, these things have been going across to Asia carrying goods for years. They've been painted white. We had them painted back to black and been given new signage. And then we had something to work with. We had this really simple kind of industrial feel to it, and we started dressing up the rest of the site with that. And the important thing was, at one point this was going to be all colourful and felt maybe more like a Brazilian favela or something, you know, really random and strong, bold colours. But each one of these companies that have got one of the 60 units inside has to exist, has to have their story to tell, has to be their brand. So when you go in there, you need to experience them. So if this place was chaos and noise, you'd never really get that. It was much better that it was simple, black and white. This chevron pattern on the floor was a kind of last-minute detail that we were asked to do on the last day whilst doing the fit for this. And it turned out to be a really important key part of the visual identity. Completely took us by surprise, and it wasn't there in the plan at the beginning of it. But it, you know, you never know where these things are going to come in. And so even though this is really simple and brutal as a piece of design, it didn't mean that we couldn't produce things beautifully. So all the print was done with huge attention to detail. These are all done on really super thick grey card that felt kind of tough and industrial as well. So it's getting all those little details right made it much better. Okay. Number 3, there are loads of design studios. So I'm talking from our point of view, but if you're an illustrator, there are a lot of illustrators out there. There's hundreds of them. And I get depressed. I look online and I see these websites, and there's some really brilliant design studios out there. Really good. We're based in Brighton, so maybe our competition is less, but still I don't really see where we're based as being that important. So you've got to be really, really good at what you do. And so if we've got a philosophy, that's great. But when we put our hands to something, we have to be really good at it. And my experience as a print designer could have come into question a few years ago. Was that the budgets from print are vanishing, but we spend so much time working in print and craft that we are now known for it, and so we get projects that have got high-end print specifications on them. So that's because we've become good at it. And so you've got to really know what you're doing, know your craft. We do a lot of digital work, but I wouldn't stand up here and declare myself as a digital designer. There are other people who could do that. They know their craft. So we hire those people, and we use their expertise. This is a piece we've done for one of our clients, geosmith, and it is just a pack of 6 of their papers that people haven't been buying. And they wanted to sort of remind people that they have these stocks, and our job was to show them off in a new way. Can you see that all right? So the whole thing folds out. It's got a series of die cuts. It looks really nice and simple. It really brings the paper to the foreground. But this is an engineering job, was super, super complex, and required a printer who had real patience. You know, a lot of printers, they just would panic with this, and there'd be, the estimate would make, you know, would basically say no to the client. But these guys were up for doing it, and they stuck with us, and we got something really great. There's a new one coming out this week, I think. But little things like getting the registration and these things right takes real time and craft. It's not these processes, what you can visualize on your computer and then what you can make outside of your computer, they're different. The mechanics of these things would rather that didn't happen. They'd move it around all over the place. So you've got to really take control of it and spend a lot of time with the people who are going to produce it to make sure you get what you want from it. 5 minutes, oh God. Here we go, okay. Print. Number 4, work with people you like. I can't stress how important this is. And okay, so we've been going 7 years, and I'm now, the studio's in a position where we can turn down work. That's great. And I know that when people set up new businesses or first go out there, that's not, it wasn't for me. There's some jobs I had to take on to keep money coming in. But where you can, if you feel you've got the option, don't just go into a project just because you fancy the work. Discover whether you like the people you're working with. You'll always make this mistake. We made it a couple of weeks ago. We've got a client at the moment who we don't want. And we're actually in talks with them about whether we're going to end up working with them anymore because it just doesn't work. That we don't get on, and that's fine. Because they're people at the end of the day. We're people. We don't, so that decision is going to make your work life a lot easier. Because if you find a client that you can work with, you're going to develop a relationship with them, and you're going to do more work with them, and it's going to be far more enjoyable. So this is a furniture designer in Denmark called Louise Campbell. We did a website for her last year. She's really experimental, and she was just do whatever you want. And then we came back with stuff, and she was really tough on every idea we had. But you couldn't make a mistake. It was, what I mean by that is anything we showed was a potential idea, and she was up for exploring it. She was really experimental, and that was the relationship we have that allowed that. So what we ended up with is there's a webcam she has in her studio, and she has created a little corner of the room where she does these little visual experiments, and every day it changes. And so it's like her sketchbook, the workings on in the back of her head is on the front of the website. And it just makes it different, because everyone else's furniture website, you go straight in and you see things like this, which comes later in the site, the chairs, the furniture and everything. But it just brings it to life, it makes it different, and she can take this camera away with her. So she goes to Cologne Furniture Fair, she sets it up in her hotel room or in the main fair, and it's got Cologne written at the bottom. Okay. Another client we love, this is a brewery in Bristol. And they're just really, really open to ideas and exploring. I'm not going to go into this because I've got just a little bit of time left.
No, you're all right.
Okay.
3 minutes. We can extend it.
Okay. All right. So I think this person was a client of mine in another company, and he left his company and set this up as his this is his baby. It's a big thing for him. He's put everything he owned into setting up this brewery in Bristol, and so that's a big trust he laid with us, and but because he had the guts to go with us and he'd worked with us already, we knew we had a proven good working relationship. The project just went very well. He trusted us from the outset. He wasn't so protective over his idea that he was going to steamroller ours and compromise the creativity. He knew better. He knew better. And then this is the most important point. And this is what I mean at the beginning when I say things I've learned so far. Every day is a school day. You never stop learning. I'm sure every day I learn something new, and whether that's about my design or not, but it's a really great thing is that I know that in 5 years' time our work will look totally different. The way we talk to clients will be totally different. What we want, who we want to work for will be totally different, and that really excites me. Why do I want to do the same thing over and over again? Nothing interesting happens when you know where you're going with something. That's Paul Sarre, the book designer. Really fantastic quote. So just a little project that we did for a client in Birmingham, the Birmingham City Council. They had an exhibition, and we were asked to design the look and feel of the show. And right in the middle of this project was this photo of this. So this was an exhibition celebrating an exhibition from 1886. And we had this photo, and right in the middle of this photo was a sign that said Central Avenue. And it'd been beautifully handwritten. And so we took that and we used that as the typeface throughout the project. So we created a typeface. There it is. Based on that, and we had some other photos that showed some of the other characters, some of the other letters. And so we ended up with this working typeface for the exhibition. And the project was over pretty quickly. It felt like quite a shame to not do anything more with it. So we spoke to our friends at Colorfun Foundry about releasing it, and they saw it, they liked it, and so we finished off the typeface. and we then produced it. We made the specimen for it, and suddenly it was out there. So this idea about kind of every day's a school day is normally we hold on to our designs. We keep them really close to us. We're in control of them until they're finally done. When you design a typeface and someone else can use it, it leaves your control, and it's really interesting to see someone work with a piece of your design. So when this had gone out there, and we thought that was it for the project, we started getting these strange emails and phone calls saying, we've just used your typeface. And this is a huge supermarket in California. Let's put it out the side. And then we got a call from a Japanese TV station, and they wanted the Japanese characters made, so we made the Japanese characters. And now this is a TV channel in Japan using it. So it's really interesting to see something you've created go out there and see it develop its own life, especially as an OCD designer like myself who likes to be in control of everything. And then the final point as part of this is learn from elsewhere. We're so easy to be given design on a spoon or illustration on a spoon, just gently handed it from all the blogs that tell us it's great. Look at this, look at this, look at this. You can spend all day looking at those things. For us, and I'm sure you hear this from lots of your tutors, that it's great to look elsewhere. And I think one of the best places where you see real design is where there are genuine problems to be fixed. Not just like, how do we sell more snakeskin handbags? Really big problems, like after the tsunami in Japan, there was a group of carpenters who went down to the area and they set up a temporary shelter, and they taught everyone who wanted to join in how to make furniture. And so the most simple furniture they could make, and everyone learned how to do it so they could start rebuilding their homes and creating community areas. A very, very simple problem fixed of carrying litres and litres of water from a well back to your village, rather than carrying it on your head. There's a water drum with a hole in it that you can pull. Absolutely genius. So, not that I'm out there to try and design something that's going to save people's lives. I just think this is a much more interesting place to look at inspiration, to think about design in a different way. So there we go.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Excellent.
Pleasure.
Shall I kick off the questions? It's kind of what I normally do. So I'll kick off with the first one, and then I'll hand it to you guys. And I'm glad, Hamish, that you said the word control towards the end of your presentation, because I wrote it down quite early on. And I just wondered, that relationship you have with clients and that finding the story, that combining that with being masters of your craft, the obsession with detail, and working with people you want to work with. When it comes to, you're in the process, it sounds like, of sacking a client at the moment, but when you're working, yeah, we won't name that client, but when you're working with that attention to detail and with that kind of obsession and with that control,
yeah.
How do you work with a number of designers, or a number of designers work with and for you? How do you know when to let some of that creative direction that probably comes quite naturally to you go, so that a more junior designer gets something into a solution? And I'm thinking in terms of, there's an attention to detail absolutely with the typography, with the production, where you're using photography, where you're using illustration, typography, and I think also, I mean, I'm kind of interested in exploring or having you explain the relationship you have with writers, because copy and the tone of voice is obviously important as well. So the first part of the question is, how do you let some of that go, or is this a moment where you say, I don't, and I'm a complete control freak? No. And the second part of the question is,
you see me squirming.
Yeah, how's that relationship extend to the people you work with, if you like them as mutual respect, I guess? But.
Okay. It's taken a long time to learn to let go of things, but I know that authorship's really important to designers, and for designers to feel like they are in a studio they love being and want to stay there, I need to sometimes work out when the decision is, actually this will make the project much better and the integrity of the idea will be better, or this is just me and my taste getting in the way. And if it's me and my taste, I'll step aside and let them, because they'll always be good. I wouldn't let a complete howler out of the studio. But yeah, and we do that, and we let everyone have their kind of project and take the lead and get in front of the clients and do all of that. That's what I'd want from people we employ. But yeah, it does take, sometimes it's an internal conversation in my head where to draw the line.
And you've worked with lots of designers over a length of time.
Yeah.
I mean, in nurturing younger designers to get to that point where they can have the confidence to internally present an idea and then have the confidence to present that idea to the client. I mean, what's the learning curve for that? I mean, do you always see that it takes a new designer that's just joined you 18 months, or can it take someone 3 months? Or
everyone's different. Some people are natural and they're just comfortable doing it. I've got one designer I've had for years and years, and he's still uncomfortable doing it. It's his personality. But he loves doing it. He loves the challenge. But so he doesn't do it that often because it's a big thing for him. But when he does, he puts loads of preparation into it, and it works really well. So everyone's different, and you kind of just feel your way. You sit in a meeting with someone, and you'll soon work out how happy they are there.
So the second part of my question, very quickly then. So if you need expertise in that the studio doesn't have, you bring that in, and that's of course that's with print, and it might be certainly with photographers and with illustrators. Does that extend to working with writers, or do your clients give you the text?
No, we work with copywriters, and especially as our work is really quite reserved, that when we place text on it, it tends to have a fairly prominent and important role, so it needs to be really well crafted. And we have a group of copywriters we work with. We do some ourselves, but our grammar's terrible, as I was telling Anthony, so we get someone to edit that. But you know, we're good at summing up what we want to say, and we sort of create a starting submission to it. But yeah, it's really important. And again, though, that relationship, whether it's a photographer or a copywriter, we have to extend trust to these people. Otherwise we're trying to control too much. And I recently worked with a really brilliant photographer, and the shoot we did wasn't going the way I expected it to, but actually when I thought about it, it's going better than I expected it to. And it would have been wrong of me to sort of step in and try and move it back to where we were intending to go and not accept the kind of new sort of direction it took. Yeah.
Okay, right, this is over to you for the next 15 minutes. So who wants the mic first? This is the bit where I just put it in someone's hand. So to save that agony, someone else, there you go, perfect. Person kicked off the bat. Let's pass the mic back just for recording.
Hello. You mentioned intuition over strategy. Mm-hmm. Can you mention or bring out a point where either you have gone with your gut feeling or whether strategy has completely overrid that? Can you highlight kind of an example?
A time where that hasn't...
Has or hasn't, either or.
Okay, well, I think on most projects, intuition rules over strategy. There's always a process at the beginning where we're researching, spending a lot of time with the people who we're doing the work for, getting our best understanding, and that is strategy. That is where you're forming your idea and you're working out, well, these people, this is what they're like, this is what they want to say to people. That is all strategy. I'm avoiding using all the buzzwords that you hear around. And so it's always there, but ultimately what we're good at is turning that into something that will give people an emotional reaction to it, that will sum this up. And so there have been projects where we've actually inherited a strategy specialist with a project. They've come chosen by the client and they've done all this work, and there's hundreds of pages of diagrams and audience profiles, and still comes down to the same thing. Once we've said, yes, yeah, we understand that, we still then use intuition. And I know there are agencies out there who don't. They sort of take these strategy documents and it says, well, this means this has got to be red, and you need to use a sans serif typeface, and it's got to look like this company. You know, it can be so precise, and that to us is no good. So I can only give you examples of when we've done it, and most of our portfolio is that intuitive translation of the strategy we learn at the beginning.
Cool. Okay, grab the mic just behind you.
Hi. You mentioned being OCD. So I just wanted to know, so when you're obsessed with detail, when you're working with clients, there's often times that you can't really get into the detail of it. How do you manage that sort of personal thing that you want to get into the details, but there's often deadlines that you need to meet. So where do you draw the line, or do you still continue and work towards that, the detail bit of it?
It always feels like we draw the line, because I suppose you could carry on infinitely.
Exactly.
So the client that I was talking about earlier, client X, has no has no appreciation for detail, and so that's why it's not working. Yeah. And so they're shouting at us saying, you need to get this quicker, blah blah blah, we need this cheaper, da, da, da. And it's like, okay, we don't work well together, we have different agendas. So there's the extreme, and we know it doesn't work, so we're going to stop. But there are clients who just haven't got the money, like the brewery I showed you earlier. That they're not a rich company. They're sort of start-up, and they're doing things as cheaply as possible, and we have to watch how much time we spend on things. Yeah. But we've actually been thoughtful about that at the beginning, and we've created a way of working on their stuff that affords us to not spend too much time on it. The illustration style was intentionally simple, so we know it would only take X amount of hours to do those illustrations. So we can be mindful of that. But then we still go into all kinds of detail on the labels and stuff.
Where's the mic going next? You get to choose. Oh, there you go. Rescued everyone else.
So I was wondering, because the company strives for the simplicity, but for example, in the sketch phase, is it already quite simple, or do you start out with like a more busy design and then scratch things away, or how does that work?
Yeah, there is normally a point where we're taking things away. I think there's always a simple element to the stuff we're creating anyway. It's not like we sort of create something really, really decorative or highly visual and then we just throw everything away. It's already, you could tell it's some of our work probably. But that idea of reaching sort of simple nirvana is about taking things away. More about the decision to take away is harder than the decision to add something. And so, yeah, that is a big part of the process.
How do you cope with self-initiated projects and client-based projects? I mean, how do you strike a balance between that?
We go through phases of doing them, so we don't strike a very good balance. And then we decide we'll do a self-initiated project, and the studio will get really busy, and we'll think, oh dear, why did we do that? Or we'll be quiet and we'll try one. So it's never ideal, but they're really important to, for everyone to to work without a client over our shoulder, to explore something, to try something completely new. We have 3 sort of lurking in the studio at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I mean, in a year, around how many self-initiated projects do you approximately?
not many. It really depends. The design, you know, if one of the designers wants to do an idea, we'll talk about it, and maybe there'll be. One of them at the moment is creating a piece of furniture, so you know that will probably take years by stealing bits of time here and there. But you know, if people are up for doing it, we'll try and make it happen.
Like for the Birmingham project that you spoke about, I mean, making the font was a self-initiated. It was taking it forward.
Yeah, that was self-initiated, but we kind of put, by engaging with Colorfun, who were going to do the final tweaks on it, we made it in a way a kind of commercial project because we knew we'd sell it in the end. So even though it was self-initiated, it felt that we needed to hurry up and do it, and it put a little bit of pressure on us to get it finished.
Okay.
Yeah.
You get to choose who you hand it to. Here we go. So something been rescued from that agony.
How important do you think are self-initiated projects for your creative, like, batteries?
I think they're important, but there's something also very important about succeeding with a commercial project and getting something that actually defies what commercial projects seem to be to some people. You know, to be able to create a really brilliant piece of design that works for the business and for the people who need it, I think in a way is more rewarding than some of the self-initiated work. But as I was saying earlier, to have projects where no client is there is really important for us too. So I don't know. I don't know. We're not all going, oh, we need money, we need money. It's actually sometimes designers like having the structure of a brief that commercial projects bring us. We just like to make sure it's for people that we like and da-da-da-da, you know.
Okay.
Yes, you can, of course you can.
I was also, like when you said that Is Night Is Dead book photographed very well, is that kind of like a coincidence that happened afterwards, or was it something you already thought about when you were designing the book?
It was something that was mentioned after we'd designed it, but before it was produced. Is someone in one of their meetings said, that's going to look great on Instagram. And so it hadn't been, it wasn't, you know, we weren't that smart, but it was really true. And strangely, I'd been through this in my old agency when we were designing for the music industry, and suddenly everything had gone digital and your album sleeves needed to work on iTunes. And so it's the same kind of thing. We just hadn't really thought about it, that was all. But I like that thought. I think it's great if you can make something that's going to...
And how would you like incorporate that in future projects?
Everything can only have 4 words on it and 2 colours and yeah, square. I don't know. We just need to be mindful. But the point is it important or not? Yeah. It's like, yes, that's relevant, especially for It's Nice That, but for another client, may not be. Yeah, may not be of any importance.
Yeah. I saw the book yesterday on the shelves at Foyles on Charing Road, and that new bookshop, that magazine kind of book section where I found it, where I saw it, you know, there's thousands of, well, certainly hundreds of publications. And okay, I know the publication because I have it, but it stood out. Just, you know, you're not designing for Instagram at the expense of the physical.
No.
And it had to. And I don't. I mean, how much of making it stand out against the crowd was the purpose of your?
Yeah, it's an important part of it, and they're spending time on the spine as well to make sure when it's racked up against other books, it's got presence. But that was the blue thing, you know. That object will sit in a bookshop, and you'll see it. It'll capture you. Yeah.
Time for another couple of questions. The mic goes to the back.
Hi, my question is a little personal. You just, not a little personal. You mentioned that you have a fine art background.
Yeah.
So, and the work we saw today it's very graphic design and very advertising based. So, do you still paint, and do you see it getting reflected in your work or whatever you studied in university? Do you think you have left behind all that knowledge and moved on to a completely new?
It's a good question. I don't know. I don't paint, and I do sort of sometimes romantically think about what my Sunday afternoons would be like if I went up on the downs and painted the downs. But one of the reasons I stopped painting is because I kept getting my shoes dirty, and so I clearly, my agenda was so off track from being. My mum's a painter, and so I think I just was going down that path because that's what I thought I wanted to do. And actually, not many people knew what graphic design was at the end of the 80s. It was sort of a growing industry, and I thought art. I was really into music packaging, you know, so I was listening to all these albums, and I would sit and look at the sleeves, but I didn't know I was looking at graphic design. I just thought it was sleeve art, and I thought artists could do that. Andy Warhol had done it. And then, sort of art college, I realised kind of quite clearly where I should be.
And do you think it's reflected in your current work, the background of fine art?
Maybe my ability to use colour, maybe some composition things. I think I draw on stuff, you know, mentally draw on stuff I learn. I don't think it has, there's no real evidence in there that I had a fine art background, so I don't know.
Do you think maybe it's influenced the kind of philosophy behind your approach? Because you said at the start that you see a lot of studios, you see a lot of great work, but there is something about longevity, and there's lots of people capable of making work that's very now, and in 5 years' time that work will be dated, it won't be relevant, and many of those companies that are very now will not continue to succeed.
Yeah.
And you're striving to find new stories, new ways of working, challenging yourself, learning stuff, encouraging the studio to learn new things. Do you think that might be, you know, part of a kind of fine art principle that wouldn't be there necessarily if you studied graphic design?
Yeah, I think quite possibly, and that also where we look for inspiration, because I don't really look at design, and I look at a lot of fine art, so I suppose that's still there. And there was one thing the fine art course really taught me, was how to talk about work. They really force you into a much more theoretical headspace, and to be able to articulate why that's happened on the canvas or in the photo or something like that. You're under much more critique on that course. So maybe those things have come through as well. But I think, yeah, that kind of always being a bit restless and keeping things moving is definitely, but I don't know if that's, I don't know, there's something about not, you know, coming from the pre-digital space where all we had was typographic now for your, or HMV. I think that keeps us with a different attitude.
Yes. With the mic's going to be over here in just a second. I didn't use it, but sorry, I'm going to use it.
If you do something which starts with an intuition and it ends with an intuition, do you admit it? Is it all right to just follow your intuition and like?
Intuition can be based around thought. When I talk about intuition, it's more that we'll have got to a thought and an idea, but it's our intuition that tells us if that feels right for the company. You know, because you're talking about colour, typography, paper, all these things that are ethereal qualities, you know, they make you react in a certain way, and what you've got to say is that colour is right for this business. It's a weird thing to be able to say, yeah, that's definitely the right pink for that company. You know, but to have conviction takes intuition, because you've got to have the foresight to see how it's going to work for them. And that's what I mean. It's not that we just go, oh, I think this will be nice. It's like, it's more structured, but at the end of it is a process where we go, yeah, I believe in that. that feels right, and that's our experience.
So you shouldn't explain it. You should just have the confidence to say this is what I thought.
No, absolutely. There's ideas in there that need explaining, or hopefully it'll explain itself.
Okay.
You know. But the intuition part is the bit that you're learning, your experience you're learning here.
Okay, thank you.
So look, we have now run out of time. Thank you very much, Hamish. That was really insightful, and I don't underestimate the challenge when we ask people to come in and speak for 20 minutes, because you've packed an awful lot in, and to get 5 really great thoughts, lessons, ideas in there, plus accompanying work, that's a lot of work that goes into making it look that simple, I know that. So please join me in thanking Hamish for a really great presentation. Thank you, Hamish.